today we're tackling something that feels, well, central for a lot of us, especially since, the 2016 election.
Right, that feeling like reality just sort of fractured. Hillary Clinton even asked, "Why did I lose?" in her book, What Happened. It really felt like something completely new and strange was going on.
It really did. It felt unprecedented. But this is where Ezra Klein, in his book, Why We're Polarized, throws a curveball, a really unsettling one.
Okay. Yeah.
He basically asks, what if nothing unusual happened? What if 2016, despite all the noise and the feeling of chaos, actually looked, and I'm quoting him here, for the most part, like every other election we've had recently?
Whoa. So the normalcy is the weird part.
That's his point. That regularity, that predictability underneath the surface is what he finds truly unnerving.
Okay, so our mission is to really dig into Klein's argument from Why We're Polarized. He's saying American politics isn't broken because of, bad actors or specific events.
Exactly. He frames it as a collection of functional parts whose efforts combine into a dysfunctional whole.
So it's not about blaming person X or party Y. It's about understanding the system itself, the mechanics.
Precisely. It's about the underlying logic of polarization, as he calls it. And that logic is heavily driven by something he identifies as political identity.
A logic of polarization, like a feedback loop.
Yeah, you got it. A more polarized public makes political institutions and leaders more polarized, and they, in turn, ramp up the polarization in the public. It just keeps escalating.
Okay, sounds like we definitely need to unpack that.
Yeah.
So if we want to get this logic, where does Klein say we should start? How do we grasp it?
He says step one is realizing just how fundamentally American politics has changed. You have to see the shift from the past.
Because the parties weren't always like this.
Not at all. For a long stretch of history, the Democrats and Republicans were, frankly, a bit of a mess, ideologically speaking. Lots of overlap. Totally muddled. Klein uses this great quote from Republican Senator William Borah back in 1923. Borah said, any man who can carry a Republican primary is a Republican.
You can believe anything, basically.
Pretty much. Free trade, League of Nations, whatever. He won the primary. He was in the club. Partisanship back then was more about, affiliation and local clout than some strict ideology.
But then you get moments like Barry Goldwater in 1964, right? A choice, not an echo. He tried to draw that clear line.
He did, and he got crushed electorally by LBJ, but it was a sign of things to come. You also had George Romney warning back then about dogmatic ideological parties. They kind of saw it starting.
And that warning seems pretty prophetic now. What happened next was this massive sorting out.
A huge sorting. And you see it really clearly in the collapse of ticket splitting. People used to vote for, say, a Democrat for president and a Republican for governor all the time. LBJ and George Romney, for instance.
That's almost vanished now.
It's virtually disappeared. Klein cites researchers Abramowitz and Webster showing the correlation between how people voted for House Democrats and the Democratic presidential candidate. People are voting straight ticket almost exclusively.
But here's a real head-scratcher Klein brings up from political scientist Corwin Smith.
The independent paradox.
Yeah. Today's so-called independents actually vote more predictably for one party than actual self-identified partisans did back in the day. How does that even work?
It works because the parties themselves are now so distinct, so clearly different, that even if you don't pay super close attention or call yourself a partisan, the choice is stark.
The signals are just clearer.
Much clearer. Klein gives some wild examples. Think about taxes. Reagan and George H.W. Bush, both Republicans, raised taxes.
Unthinkable today for the GOP.
Absolutely unthinkable. Or healthcare. Medicare passed in '65 with significant Republican support. But Obamacare, which was literally modeled on Republican ideas like Mitt Romney's Massachusetts plan.
0 Republican votes. 0.
0. And abortion is another huge one. Klein points out that back in '82, Senator Joe Biden, a Democrat, actually voted for a constitutional amendment to let states overturn Roe v. Wade. He talked about his Catholic faith, the politics of the moment.
You just wouldn't see that today. The lines are completely clear now. Democrats, pro-choice, Republicans, anti-abortion. Full stop.
It's like Klein says, right? It's easier to tell apart a donkey and an elephant than a donkey and a mule. The choices are just fundamentally different now.
And that clarity, that difference, feeds into something else.
Yeah.
Negative partisanship.
Yeah, this is crucial. It's not just about loving your own party. It's increasingly about hating the other one. The American National Election Studies use this feelings thermometer.
How warm or cold you feel towards groups.
Exactly. And people's feelings toward their own party actually dipped a bit over time. But their feelings toward the opposing party plummeted from a sort of lukewarm 45 out of 100 in 1980 down to a freezing 29 by 2016.
Wow. That's not just dislike, that's hostility. And it sounds like it goes beyond just feelings into actual fear.
Oh, absolutely. Klein cites polls showing the rise of panicked assessments. In 2014, about a third of both Republicans and Democrats saw the other party as an actual threat to the nation's well-being.
Only a third. Seems low now, but...
Well, wait. By 2016, just 2 years later, that jumped to 45% of Republicans and 41% of Democrats feeling that threat.
Oh, okay, that's a big jump. It's becoming existential for people. Is this fear just a symptom, or does Klein argue it actually drives the polarization further?
It definitely drives it. And this brings us right to the absolute core of Klein's book, Why We're Polarized, the idea of political identity.
Identity politics. That term gets thrown around a lot, often negatively.
Right. And Klein actually wants to sort of rescue the term. He goes back to its origins. It came from the Combahide River Collective, a Black feminist lesbian group in 1977.
What was their point?
Their point was that marginalized groups needed to define their own political theories based on their own lived experiences, their identities. It was about self-definition from the margins.
But that's not how it's often used now, is it?
No, it's often been, as Klein says, weaponized, used dismissively to describe only the concerns of marginalized groups, while the identity politics of dominant groups just gets called,
Regular politics. Good old-fashioned politics.
Exactly. And understanding this history is key because the civil rights era was such a massive catalyst for the sorting we were just talking about.
How so? Because of the Democrats and the South.
Precisely. You had this long-standing arrangement, the Dixiecrat dilemma. Southern Democrats basically got a pass to enforce white supremacy locally in exchange for being reliable votes nationally on other issues. You got it. National influence. Think of Strom Thurmond. His famous 1957 filibuster against a civil rights bill is one example. But Klein also mentions a perhaps more telling one. Thurmond's 1965 filibuster against repealing part of the Taft-Hartley Act, a labor law.
Why is that significant?
It showed how entrenched that Southern power was, even into the mid-60s, protecting their interests beyond just race, reinforcing their clout within the Democratic Party for decades.
Until the dam broke with the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
That was the rupture point. And here's a fascinating detail Klein highlights. 80% of House Republicans actually voted for the bill. Only 60% of House Democrats did.
Wait, Republicans supported more, but Democrats get the credit. Or blame, depending on your view.
Because the Democrats held the majority, and President Johnson chose to push it through, effectively breaking that old alliance with the Dixiecrats. That's when LBJ supposedly made that famous remark.
I think we just delivered the South of the Republican Party for a long time to come.
And boy, was he right. That decision set the stage for this massive, comprehensive sorting. It leads to what Liliana Mason calls partisanship becoming a mega-identity.
Mega-identity, meaning it bundles everything together.
Everything. Your party vote suddenly signals not just your party preference, but potentially your religion, race, ethnicity, gender, neighborhood, and favorite grocery store, as Klein puts it, quoting Mason. It all aligns.
So it's not just ideology anymore, it's demographic sorting too.
It's huge demographic sorting. The numbers are stark. Klein notes that in 1952, only 6% of Democrats identified as non-white.
6%.
By 2012, 43%. Meanwhile, the Republican Party remained overwhelmingly white.
And religion follows suit.
Yep, Republicans' largest group, evangelical Protestants. Democrats' largest group, the religiously unaffiliated, the no-dems. As Levitsky and Ziblatt put it in their work, the parties became deeply divided over race and religion, two deeply polarizing issues that hit our core identities.
And even where we live reflects this. Klein talks about the red state, blue state map being incredibly stable since 2000.
It's stunningly stable. And it boils down to a stark urban-rural divide. He cites data showing areas with more than about 900 people per square mile lean Democratic. Below that, Republican.
Think about the county maps.
Exactly. Bill Clinton won almost half of all counties in the country. Hillary Clinton in 2016, she won fewer than 500. It visually shows how geographically segregated we've become politically.
It's ideological, demographic, geographic.
Does it go even deeper?
Klein argues it goes right down to our psychology. He discusses the big 5 personality traits.
Like openness, conscientiousness.
Those are the key ones here. Openness to experience tends to correlate with liberalism, and conscientiousness liking order. Duty correlates with conservatism.
And these traits are now aligning with party.
Increasingly so, especially for white voters. Klein says these underlying psychological predispositions have become the dividing line of American politics. They act like magnet stacking, pulling everything into alignment.
Wow, it sounds almost like we're biologically predisposed to this groupishness. Well, Klein definitely leans into that. He brings up Henri Tajfel's research. Tajfel survived the Holocaust, and it drove him to understand group identity and prejudice.
What did he find?
His minimal group experiments are famous. You randomly put people into groups based on totally meaningless criteria, like whether they overestimated or underestimated dots on a screen.
Okay, completely arbitrary.
Totally arbitrary. And yet, people immediately started showing gratuitous discrimination. They'd favor their own group when distributing rewards, even if it meant less reward overall, and even with no personal gain, just pure in-group preference.
That's sobering.
Yeah.
Just belonging to a group, any group, makes us favor us over them.
It seems incredibly deep-seated. Klein uses the analogy of sports fandom. People get so invested, their happiness attached to the outcome of a game that they are not playing.
Right, people riot over sports.
Exactly. Riots where the stakes are purely psychological, purely emotional. He quotes a book title, "To hate like this is to be happy forever," to capture that intense tribal feeling. It's not rational calculation, it's primal.
And maybe linked to survival instincts, feeling safe in the group.
That seems to be the implication. Klein mentions research on loneliness, showing that socially isolated people experience these micro-awakenings during sleep, like their brain is constantly checking for threats.
Like an evolutionary alarm system saying, danger, you're alone.
Sort of, yeah. His point is, our brains evolved for and are exquisitely tuned for small, tight-knit groups. But they really struggle with the sheer scale, noise, and sophisticated manipulations of modern politics and media. We're overwhelmed.
And that struggle leads to weird thinking.
It leads to what Klein calls identity protective cognition. You might know it as motivated reasoning. Think of it like having a little press secretary in your head.
Whose job isn't to find the truth,
but to defend the team, to spin the facts, rationalize, justify your group's position, no matter what the evidence says.
And this connects back to that point about knowledgeable partisans being more likely to get facts wrong.
Exactly. Klein cites Dan Kahn's research showing this. People who know more about politics are often better at twisting facts to fit their identity. Like, did the deficit go up or down under Clinton? Highly informed partisans were more likely to get it wrong if the right answer clashed with their party's narrative.
Because being factually wrong costs them nothing, personally.
Right. As Klein puts it, the cost to her of making a mistake on the science is zero. Getting a climate fact wrong or the deficit number wrong doesn't really impact her life day to day.
But being out of step with a group...
The cost of being out of sync with her peers is potentially catastrophic. Losing social standing, friendships, maybe even professional connections. So in a way, prioritizing the group over the facts becomes individually rational, even if it's collectively disastrous.
Okay, that's a heavy concept. So how do these powerful identities actually play out in today's political fights? Klein connects it to demographic change, right?
He does. The Census Bureau's projection of a majority-minority U.S. by around 2045 looms large.
And just hearing about that change has an effect.
Apparently, yes. Klein points to studies by Craig and Richardson. They found that even subtle reminders of ongoing demographic shifts make white Americans lean more towards conservative policies and the Republican Party. It seems to trigger a defensive reaction.
So it's not just the economy.
Klein really pushes back on that. He brings in what he calls unnerving data from the book Identity Crisis by Sides, Tesler, and Vavrick. Their research suggests it might be the other way around.
What do you mean?
That racial resentment activated economic anxiety rather than the other way around. For instance, under Obama, high-income Republicans were actually less satisfied with the economy than low-income Democrats were.
Their feelings about the economy didn't match their objective circumstances, but did match their political identity.
Exactly. It suggests cultural and identity anxieties were shaping economic perceptions, not just the other way around.
And this isn't just us. Klein sees this globally.
Yeah, he argues the rise of the populace, right?
Yeah.
In many countries seems more strongly linked to demography and culture than purely economic factors.
Which might explain why things like the political correctness wars get so heated. They're proxies for these bigger identity clashes.
That seems to be the idea. Klein quotes Jennifer Richardson calling it the democratization of discomfort. Groups that previously didn't have much voice are now demanding respect and consideration, which can feel like a threat to those used to being dominant.
Like the Bret Stephens bedbug incident Klein mentions, a prominent columnist reacting very strongly to online criticism.
Right. Klein uses it as an example of how even powerful people can react fiercely when they feel their identity or status is attacked, however slightly. Everyone feels protective of their safe space, their identity.
Okay, let's talk media. How does the modern media landscape fit into Klein's picture of polarization?
It's a huge amplifier. He cites Marcus Pryor's work showing this paradox. The internet gave us way more choice, but not necessarily more information for everyone.
How so?
Political junkies gorged on information and learned more than ever. But people who weren't that interested could now easily tune politics out entirely for entertainment. So that gap between the informed and the tuned out actually widened.
And for those who are tuned in, what kind of information are they getting?
Increasingly, it's information designed to provoke outrage. Klein says in today's media environment, with constant analytics tracking clicks and views, the rule is often, if it outrages, it leads.
Because outrage gets engagement, clicks, shares, comments.
Precisely. So outlets have an incentive to amplify the most controversial voices and conflicts. Klein notes Fox News focusing on someone like Ilhan Omar, while MSNBC might focus on Steve King. They highlight the figures most likely to anger the other side, weaponizing those differences.
And trying to expose people to the other side's views doesn't necessarily help.
This is maybe the most counterintuitive finding Klein discusses. He cites a study where researchers paid partisans to follow Twitter bots that retweeted messages from politicians and pundits on the other side.
Okay, forced exposure. Did it moderate them?
Nope. It actually increased their polarization on policy issues, especially for Republicans.
It backfired. Why?
Klein's interpretation is that exposure to the other side's attacks is likely to trigger rebuttal, not reflection. Seeing the other side just reinforces your own group's views and makes you dig in.
Which sounds like a dynamic someone like Donald Trump understood really well.
Klein argues Trump was masterful at exploiting exactly this. He used outrageousness, offensiveness, and identity cues constantly. Why? Because it guaranteed media coverage and energized his base while infuriating his opponents. It showed that in this environment, identitarian candidates who arouse the strongest passions have an advantage.
This all feeds into another concept Klein discusses, from Julia Azari. Weak parties, strong partisanship. That sounds like a contradiction.
It does, right? But Azari's point, which Klein adopts, is that the official party organizations, the DNC, the RNC, the party bosses of old, have lost a lot of power.
But our feeling of being a Democrat or a Republican, our partisan identity, is stronger than ever.
Exactly. Think about presidential primaries. Handing nominations over to voters rather than party elites in smoke-filled rooms empowers the intense minority of party supporters who actually showed up for primaries.
Making the parties less able to control who their nominee is.
Right. Which makes the system more vulnerable to outsiders or demagogues, as Klein puts it, who can capture that intense base, like Trump did, even if the party establishment doesn't want them.
And campaign finance plays into this too, small donors.
Yeah, the rise of online small-dollar fundraising changes incentives. Candidates are encouraged to nationalize themselves, to focus on big, hot-button, polarizing issues that fire up donors anywhere in the country rather than maybe focusing on local needs or compromise.
Because that's what gets the clicks, the donations, the attention.
Exactly. As Klein writes, loud gets noticed, extreme gets noticed, confrontational gets noticed, moderate, conciliatory, judicious, not so much.
When you have strong partisans and weak parties, operating in a system that rewards confrontation, what happens to governing?
You get institutional dysfunction. Bipartisanship doesn't just become difficult. Klein argues it often becomes politically irrational for elected officials.
Like the Merrick Garland Supreme Court nomination.
That's Klein's prime example. Mitch McConnell blocking Garland's hearing was a major break from traditional Senate norms. But Klein argues McConnell wasn't being irrational. He was doing precisely what his voters wanted, rewarding his base-trumped institutional norms.
This sounds like what Juan Linz warned about with the perils of presidentialism.
Exactly. Linz argued that systems like ours, with a separately elected president and legislature, are prone to gridlock and crisis when parties become highly polarized. Both sides can claim democratic legitimacy, leading to these irresolvable conflicts.
And tools that used to be minor hurdles become weapons, like the filibuster.
Or the debt ceiling. Klein points out how these are no longer just tools for delay or embarrassment. They've become confrontational zero-sum strategies aimed at sabotaging the other party, even if it means hurting the country. He mentions a 2009 filibuster on unemployment benefits that eventually passed 97-1 and the 2011 debt ceiling crisis. It's about maximizing partisan leverage.
And Klein also discusses an asymmetry here, arguing the parties haven't polarized equally.
He does argue that, suggesting the Republican Party has moved further right and become more ideologically uniform, overwhelmingly white, Christian, and driven by that conservative ideology. The Democratic Party, in contrast, is presented as a more diverse coalition of different groups, maybe more transactional.
And he points to figures like William Barr.
Yeah, Klein cites speeches by then Attorney General Barr, who framed political conflict as almost a holy war against secularism. Klein sees this as revealing a conservative worldview where the stakes feel truly existential, justifying more extreme tactics.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot here, from Ezra Klein's Why We're Polarized, the sorting, the mega-identities, the motivated reasoning, the media feedback loops, the institutional problems. Where does this leave us? Is polarization just bad?
Well, Klein is careful to say polarization itself isn't automatically bad. Sometimes, he argues, often it's a solution. Like the polarization around civil rights eventually led to progress breaking an unjust status quo.
So the problem isn't polarization per se, but the kind we have now.
Exactly. This specific form, where it's so deeply tied to layered identities, fueled by negative partisanship, and baked into our institutions in a way that creates dysfunction, that's the issue.
So for you listening, navigating this world, what can you actually do? Klein offers a couple of thoughts.
One is what he calls identity mindfulness. Basically just noticing. Noticing when a news story or a social media post or a conversation triggers that political identity defensiveness in you. How does it feel?
Just being aware of that internal press secretary kicking into gear.
Right. As Robert Wright suggests, being acutely aware of when your reasoning is being driven by group loyalty rather than objective assessment. It doesn't magically fix it, but awareness is a first step.
And the other suggestion is about shifting focus.
Yeah, rediscovering a politics of place. Klein tells this story about Eric Hagerman, a guy who basically tuned out national news completely to focus on restoring native prairie on his pig farm in Ohio.
That sounds extreme, but the point is about localism.
The point is that local politics is often, though not always, less polarized. The issues can feel more tangible, fixing potholes, school board stuff, and critically, Klein argues, you can have a lot more impact locally than you probably can yelling about national politics online.
Interesting. Okay, so Klein suggests in the book there are no solutions, only corrections. No magic wand for polarization.
Seems that way. It's a complex system with deep roots.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with, based on why we're polarized. In this era where our identities are so deeply fused into these political mega-identities, and our institutions often reward conflict over cooperation, how do we find enough common ground, enough collective rationality to even choose the corrections that might actually help everyone, even if they don't feel like a clear win for our own side?
That does feel like the central challenge, doesn't it? How do we manage the psychology when the system itself pushes us apart?